Welcome to the party. You found the Mouse Castle Lounge, the place to be for good times and great conversations from the world of Disney. The bar is open, your table is waiting, and drinks are now being served. Come on in. And now, here's your host, the keeper of the Mouse Castle Lounge, Tim Calloway.
Welcome to the lounge. It's December 4th, 2015, and I'm Tim Calloway. We've got a terrific show for you today. My guest is the producer of such legendary films as Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King. His latest project is a PBS special spotlighting the music of Richard Sherman. Ladies and gentlemen, Don Hahn is back in the lounge. But first, stay up to date with everything going on in the Mouse Castle. Visit us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Mouse Castle. On Twitter, I am Disney Tim, and please follow the Mouse Castle on Tumblr, Pinterest, and Instagram. Got any questions or comments about the show? Just email us at podcast@themousecastle.com or call our listener line at 702-475-5MCL. That's 702-475-5625. And we hope you'll also visit the blog at themousecastle.com, where you can download the free Mouse Castle Lounge app for your mobile device. Just click the pic that says, "Get the app." On December 17th, PBS SoCal will air the musical special Richard M. Sherman, Songs of a Lifetime. It's a 1-hour studio performance by the songwriter and Disney legend. Just him, a piano, and a few friends to sing along. It celebrates the decades-long musical collaboration that was the Sherman Brothers, and it's certain to include tunes from such classic Disney and non-Disney films like Mary Poppins, The Jungle Book, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and so many others. Richard M. Sherman, Songs of a Lifetime is produced by my guest today, a gentleman who's also made significant contributions to the Disney legacy. Don Hahn's producer and executive producer credits include Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, The Emperor's New Groove, Waking Sleeping Beauty, Frankenweenie, Maleficent, and the Disneynature films Oceans and African Cats. Don is a respected author whose latest book, Before Ever After, recounts in exquisite detail the history of the artist training program that existed at the Walt Disney Studios in the 1930s and 40s. Don is also a tireless supporter of preserving animation and film history. You know, someone should probably give him an award for that. Don Hahn is my guest today in the Mouse Castle Lounge. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the Mouse Castle Lounge producer Don Hahn. How you doing today, Don?
I'm doing really great, thank you.
First off, the Annie Award nominations were announced this week. That's how the animation industry honors its own. And you, sir, congratulations are in order. You were named the recipient of this year's June Foray Award. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, what a surprise. It's a pretty cool honor because June, who is a kind of centerpiece of the animation industry for many, many years and one of the founders of ASIFA Hollywood, has this award named after her, and it's about kind of service and, it says benevolence, but I'm not sure I'm that benevolent, but, service to the animation industry. And so it means a lot to me because arts education means a lot to me, and passing on the knowledge of Disney animators means a lot to me. And, preserving the history of, the film industry is something that I think is important because I certainly learned a lot along the way from some really amazing people. I worked with Wooly Reitherman and with Howard Ashman and so many great people, and to be able to pass that along is one thing, and then to be able to have your colleagues acknowledge you is humbling. It's terrific. So I sure appreciate the honor from ASIFA, and thanks for mentioning it.
Yes, very much so. And June Foray herself was the first recipient of the award. What did they call it before they gave it to you think?
I don't know. What an interesting dilemma that would be. Like if it were the Don or Tim Award, would you give, you have to give it to yourself, and then what do you, I don't know. We'll have to talk more on that.
Yes, and of course you join the ranks of some other very well-regarded names that have also received the award. People like Leonard Maltin, Tom Cito, who's been a guest on the show, Alice Davis, and Charles Solomon. How does it feel to join such an elite group of individuals?
Well, it's great. I mean, on one hand, they're all friends, so they are truly elite, and on the other hand, they're truly people I have lunch with. So it's great, and I think. What's interesting to me and what feels a little funny is we're so used to honoring the generation of Nine Old Men or the guys that have been around a while, and then you suddenly realize, well, wait a minute, I've been around for a while, so I guess it's kind of turning to people like Cito and myself who are, the same age, and, I've been around the industry for a while, so, but it is a huge honor to be in the same company as people like that.
Yeah. How did you find out about it?
I heard some rumblings beforehand, and I got a note from Frank Gladstone, who's the head of ASIFA Hollywood, And I said, "Are you sure there's not a paperwork mistake?" And he said, "No, this is real. The board wanted to, give you this honor." So I talked to him. I talked to Charles Solomon, who's also on the board, and he said, "No, it's the real deal." So, but very flattering, especially coming from friends and coming from colleagues in animation.
Yes, and of course the Annie Awards will be coming up February 6th. It goes on UCLA's Royce Hall. Usually streams online if you can't make it there in person. Got the tux picked out already?
I'm going to be sending it out to the dry cleaners, and I'll wear a clean shirt that night.
Very cool.
Not to imply that I don't normally wear a clean shirt, but I just, it'll be a special night for sure.
Richard Sherman, Songs of a Lifetime. The term soundtrack of your life is kind of a worn out phrase, but it really does apply when you talk about Richard Sherman, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I think he probably invented it. So he's certainly can use it. He did. When you think of it, so many of the songs, not just from film music and television, but also theme parks. When you go to Disneyland or Disney World and you hear It's a Small World or you're in the Tiki Room, you're hearing the Sherman Brothers. And Richard is such a world-class songwriter and musician, and he really did, kind of forge all those terrific songs that we all grew up with.
And just to quickly summarize, he and his brother Robert together during their period at Disney, and this is just at Disney alone, over 200 songs for 27 films, a couple of dozen TV productions. And this is at a time too, you don't hear the term of like studio songwriters anymore. It just, do you think we'll ever see, an output like that, like we saw with the Sherman Brothers?
It's pretty rare. The only people I can think of that compare us slightly to it would be like Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, who were with us for a few years in the 90s to do Little Mermaid and Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast. But the Sherman Brothers surpassed that in large measure because they were there for so long, for 10 years. And having a staff songwriter is really not something that happens at all anymore. So here's a couple guys literally down the hall from Walt Disney where he could just ring up and say, "Hey, come on down," and they could go through a story or they could play something for Walt and end up being a primary collaborator just as the artists and animators were.
Now, for Songs of a Lifetime, Richard is performing, and he'll be accompanied by Ashley Brown, who was the original Mary Poppins on Broadway, the talented Juliana Hanson, and you're also bringing in a barbershop quartet.
Yes, a barbershop quartet, which, how often do you get to see that on any television show? But thank God for PBS because they give us the arts in large measure and we're able to see things like this show. I mean, the whole genesis of this show started out with probably a couple years ago. I kept seeing Richard play at these fan conventions, at D23 in particular, and it's wonderful. I just thought, well, wait, nobody's filming this, and it's kind of evaporating and going into thin air. And if you could sit there and spend some time with him and actually film him and capture that on film, what a special gift that would be to the audience. So I sat around for a long time. I talked to some people about it, and finally I said, I'm just going to do this. And I called up Richard. I said, "Richard, would you show up on a stage and, if I got some cameras, would you do this?" And it was really that informal a start. And he said, "Well, yeah, sure, I'll do it." And, we sat down for a few times and planned out what we would sing because we wanted to sing not just his Disney songs, but he wrote music for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and Charlotte's Web and Tom Sawyer and so many other movies. We wanted to have him play some of those. And he wrote, "You're 16, You're Beautiful in Your Mind" that Ringo Starr sang. Mm-hmm. And people will go like, "Really? He wrote that?" So to have Richard sit there and capture it on film was a real treat for me, and I think for the audience, it'll be the same.
And Richard is 87 years old. He's still very active, very energetic. He still writes songs. What is it like to work with him in the studio?
Well, it's like working with anyone, any musician. It really helps you understand that age is just a state of mind. There's no sense that you're making any accommodation for a person's age or that it's a disability or anything. It's not even there in the room. He's simply playing and collaborating. And as you said, we have people like Ashley Brown show up and sing some of the songs with him, like "Feed the Birds" from Mary Poppins, which she sang on Broadway for years. And you capture these magical moments. So he's a remarkable guy. And I think quite often these people exist behind the scenes. And Richard's had some time in the limelight in that terrific documentary, The Boys, that was made about Richard and his brother Bob. But I think in this case, it's not a documentary. It's not about his life as much as it is about his music. and to actually have him sit down and play his music over 30 songs in part or in whole, and have him, the songwriter, sing the Tiki Room, and have him sing It's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, and have you hear those songs performed is just breathtaking.
I am one of those fortunate people, as you mentioned, that have been able to see Richard perform in public a couple of times. I always enjoy how when he performs It's a Small World, it's not the upbeat, sing-song version of the song that we're used to at Disneyland or Walt Disney World.
Yeah.
This song is a ballad, and it's a very sweet, I think, prayer for peace is what Richard calls it.
Yeah, that's exactly what he calls it, and it's so unexpected because we're used to seeing it with this, these animatronic dolls and this, kind of upbeat show. But when you think of his original concept for the song was really about this, can't we all get along kind of United Nations feeling, this UNICEF kind of feeling to it all, it makes it even more poignant, I think.
And so aside from Richard performing his songs, does he tell a lot of stories, like the backstories of the songs that he's performing?
Yeah, he does. I think that's part of the joy of, if you've been lucky enough to see Richard perform live, he'll tell you about it. He'll tell you about when he was in the car with Walt Disney and, had just come back from seeing the General Electric Pavilion at the World's Fair, or when he was in Walt's office playing Feed the Birds on his piano. So you get this insight into who Richard was, who Bob was, who Walt Disney was. And I also, in the special, tried to use a lot of archival photographs of the boys working together and some film clips, so you get a sense of who these people were and who they still are. And, we sing in this special songs that Richard wrote in the last 5 years, and they're some of the best songs he's ever written. Kiss Goodnight for the Disneyland fireworks show. It's spectacular, and you realize that this guy has no boundaries, including age, and he's kind of at the top of his game right now. And to capture him on film has been a real treat.
He even wrote a song for one of the Marvel movies. Can't remember if it was Iron Man or Captain America, but
He did. I think it was for Iron Man, and he was able to, crank that out as just part of his life. And he's just incredible. So I didn't know him that well before this whole experience, and having spent the last 2 months here with him almost every day, not only recording it, but on the mixing stage, and lately, even this afternoon, we're going into the video stage to do final outputs and check the color on the special. It's been a pleasure, and you realize why Walt Disney would have selected this guy and his brother to collaborate with, because he's incredibly collaborative. He has no ego. It's all about the work. It's a real Disney spirit, I guess, which makes sense because these are the founders of the company and the people who almost invented that Disney spirit.
Now, Richard M. Sherman's Songs of a Lifetime is going to air on PBS in Southern California. Can we expect to see it nationwide?
Yeah, you sure can. I think the pattern I wanted to take with it, and PBS has been incredibly supportive in Southern California, is to show it here to our 11 million viewers on the board of PBS in Southern California. And this is the exact kind of programming that we want to do to, bring the arts to our audience. And I've already shared it with WGBH in Boston, and I think if the program is successful in Southern California, there's a great chance you'll see it go out across the nation and everybody can see it as well. So if you're listening and you're in Southern California, tell a friend and tune in, and I'm sure it'll be a great success.
Absolutely. Now, one other project that I want to bring up, among the many projects that you work on, you are a busy guy. You recently co-wrote a book called Before Ever After, The Lost Lectures of Walt Disney's Animation Studios. And that focuses on a pretty incredible period at the Walt Disney Studios. It was a time when the studio had its own in-house art school. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it really did. Walt started our art school on Hyperion Boulevard with his production company. I think the book is about and kind of answers the question, how the heck did these people get from drawing black and white stick figures in 1927 to making films like Snow White, Fantasia, Pinocchio, Bambi, Dumbo? That's a huge leap.
From Steamboat Willie to Snow White in less than 10 years.
Yeah, and even before that, they were doing, here's a couple of black and white mice playing xylophones on hippo teeth, and you just think, well, how did they get there? So, they got there in a very deliberate way. It wasn't just accident. It was a combination of certainly some political and economic factors, like the Depression played into it. So great artists from around the country migrated towards Disney, but that doesn't tell the whole story. Disney was very active in going out to New York and Chicago and advertising and trying to look at portfolios. Don Graham, who was the principal instructor at the Disney Animation School at that time, spent 2 or 3 months in New York looking at portfolios and recruiting people. So it wasn't just a depression or by accident. It was a real deliberate act. And then when those trainees got to the studio in Los Angeles on Hyperion, Walt brought in everything from fine arts teachers to life drawing instructors to animals to draw. He brought in hundreds of books and created a library in-house. And he realized that to make the kind of movies he wanted to make, he had to raise the artistic level of his talent. And that was about not just cartoons. It was about bringing in fine artists to talk about art history and to talk about drawing and action analysis and acting and composition and all those things that right now we may say, oh, of course Disney films have that. Well, they have that because Walt Disney had a very deliberate vision for upping the level of his artists. And, of course, that training program paid dividends for decades to come.
And in Before Ever After, you're not just retelling these stories. You have the original lectures and notes that are copied into the book. Why was it important to include those original documents?
Well, when these lectures happened back in the 30s and very early 40s, they were always transcribed. So they must have recorded them and had a secretary or someone transcribe them into a document, mainly because Walt wanted everybody to know what he was thinking and what was going on in terms of the training. So these documents were passed out to people, and they ended up being handed down to the archives and the library at Disney. Well, I have been at Disney since 1976, so I remember seeing these aged documents on the shelf in the library and saying, what the heck are these? And I had in the back of my mind at some point, somebody needs to share this information and publish it. So with the help of Becky Klein in the archives and many amazing people, we rounded up all these lectures. A lot of them were missing, so we went out and found them in the public, people who had bought them at auctions, and just tried to bring them all together in one place. And then we made the decision to actually photograph them and put them in the book. Instead of transcribing them or editing them or whatever, we thought, no, let's make you feel like you're there at the Hyperion studio right when Walt was. Let's make you feel like you just received the handout and you're going to read what happened last night, And I think that's what makes it exciting. You can read, like Frank Lloyd Wright visited the studio. Well, you think, why? It's a cartoon studio. But to Walt, it was important to show a cross-section of talent and the best in the industry. So George Balanchine came and talked about choreography and dance, and Stravinsky was in the studio, and H.G. Wells was in the studio, and Chaplin was walking around. And it was a very vital, alive, wonderful gasoline fire of a time at the studio, and that's what we try to capture in this book.
It is just jaw-dropping to see the talent that went through the studio at that time, and that's not including the people that we already know about.
Yeah, it is. In fact, we quite often refer to the Nine Old Men or Mary Blair, and rightfully so. They're wonderful talents. But you realize those were the second generation of artists. They weren't the founders. They weren't the inventors of the craft. The inventors of the craft were in this era in the 20s and 30s. And they were people like Bill Teitla and Freddie Moore and Art Babbitt. And, if there was another group of 9, earlier on, they were the founders of the studio. And they deserve as much credit and due as do people like the Nine Old Men, because they were the trainers. They were the mentors of the Nine Old Men's generation.
Before Ever After is the book. It's the Lost Lectures of Walt Disney's Animation Studios. If you were a Disney fan, it makes a great Christmas gift, I've heard.
I'm telling you. And I'll come over to the house and read it to the kids, too, if you'd like.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Twas the night before Snow White.
More.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And, of course, again, Richard M. Sherman, Songs of a Lifetime. It's on PBS SoCal on December 17th at 7 p.m., rolling out nationwide, we hope, soon thereafter. Don, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time today.
Same here. It's my pleasure.
And that will do it for this edition of the Mouse Castle Lounge. Thank you to Don Hahn for being my guest. When next we meet, my guest in the lounge will be noted Disney historian Jim Korkis. He'll be talking about 2 of his latest books, The Vault of Walt Volume 4 and Secret Stories of Walt Disney World. Don't miss out. Stay up to date with everything going on in the Mouse Castle Lounge. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud. You can also download the free Mouse Castle Lounge app, which you can get right now by going to themousecastle.com and clicking Get the App. Anthony Reynolds and I host Inside the Mouse Castle with your weekly dose of Disney news, information, and commentary. We'll be back again on Monday night, so please join us. The Mouse Castle Lounge is not affiliated with the Walt Disney Company. I just like to talk about him. I'm Tim Calloway. It's been a blast as always, so let's do this again real soon. Take care.